Pax vobiscum, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to continue reading Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. Today we will continue with Chapter 9, Merrylegs. Mr. Blomfield, the vicar, had a large family of boys and girls. Sometimes they used to come and play with Miss Jessie and Flora. One of the girls was as old as Miss Jessie, two of the boys were older, and there were several little ones. When they came there was plenty of work for Merrylegs, for nothing pleased them so much as getting on him by turns, and writing him all about the orchard and the home paddock, and this they would do by the hour together. One afternoon he had been out with them a long time, and when James brought him in and put on his halter, he said, "There, you rogue, mind how you behave yourself, or we shall get into trouble." "What have you been doing, Merrylegs?" I asked. "Oh," said he, tossing his little head, "I have only been giving those young people a lesson. They did not know when they had had enough, nor when I had had enough, so I just pitched them off backward. That was the only thing they could understand." "What?" said I. "You threw the children off? I thought you did know better than that. Did you throw Miss Jessie or Miss Flora?" He looked very much offended and said, "Of course not. I would not do such a thing for the best oats that ever came into the stable. Why, I am as careful of our young ladies as the master could be. And as for the little ones, it is I who teach them to ride. When they seem frightened or a little unsteady on my back, I go as smooth and as quiet as an old pussy when she is after a bird. And when they are all right, I go again faster, you see, just to get them used to it. So don't you trouble yourself preaching to me. I am the best friend and the best riding master those children have. It is not them, it is the boys. Boys," said he, shaking his mane, "are quite different. They must be broken in as we were broken in when we were colts, and just be taught what's what. The other children had ridden me for about nearly 2 hours, and then the boys thought it was their turn. And so it was, and I was quite agreeable. They rode me by turns, and I galloped them about, up and down the fields and all about the orchard for a good hour. They'd each cut a great hazel stick for a riding whip, and laid it on a little too hard. But I took it on in good part, till at last I thought we had had enough, and so I stopped 2 or 3 times by way of a hint. Boys, you see, think a horse or pony is like a steam engine or a thrashing machine, and can go on as long and as fast as they please. I never think that a pony can get tired or have any feelings, so as one who was whipping me could not understand, I just rose up on my hind legs and let him slip off behind. That was all. He mounted me again, and I did the same. Then the other boy got up, and as soon as he began to use his stick I laid him on the grass, and so on, till they were able to understand. That was all. They are not bad boys. They don't wish to be cruel. I like them very well. But as you see, I had to give them a lesson. When they brought me to James and told him, I think he was very angry to see such big sticks. He said they were only fit for drovers or gypsies, and not for young gentlemen." "If I had been you," said Ginger, "I would have given those boys a good kick, and that would have given them a lesson." "No doubt you would," said Merrylegs, "but then I am not quite such a fool, begging your pardon, as to anger our master or make James ashamed of me. Besides, those children are under my charge when they are riding. I tell you that they are entrusted to me. Why, only the other day I heard our master say to Mrs. Blomfield, 'My dear madam, you need not be anxious about the children. My old Merrylegs will take as much care of them as you or I could. I assure you I would not sell that pony for any money. He is so perfectly good-tempered and trustworthy.' And do you think I am such an ungrateful brute as to forget all of the kind treatment I have had here for 5 years, and all the trust they place in me, and turn vicious because a couple of ignorant boys used me badly? No, no. You never had a good place where they were kind to you, and so you don't know, and I'm sorry for you. But I can tell you good places make good horses. I wouldn't vex our people for anything. I love them, I do," said Merrylegs, and he gave a low through his nose, as he used to do in the morning when he heard James's footstep at the door. "Besides," he went on, "if I took to cooking, where should I be? Why, sold off in a jiffy, and no character, and I might find myself slaved about under a butcher's boy, or worked to death at some seaside place where no one cared for me, except to find out how fast I could go, or to be flogged along in some cart with 3 or 4 great men in it, going out for a Sunday spree, as I have often seen in the place I lived in before I came here. No," he said, shaking his head, "I hope it will never come to that." Ginger and I were not of the regular tall carriage horse breed. We had more racing blood in us. We stood about 15½ hands high. We were therefore just as good for riding as we were for driving, and our master used to say that he disliked either horse or man that could do but one thing, and as he did not show off in London parks, he preferred a more active and useful kind of horse. As for us, our greatest pleasure was when we were saddled for a riding party, the master on Ginger, the mistress on me, and the young ladies on Sir Oliver and Merrylegs. It was so cheerful to be trotting and cantering all together that it always put us in high spirits. I had the best of it, for I always carried the mistress. Her weight was little, her voice was sweet, and her hand was so light on the rein that I was guided almost without feeling it. Oh, if people knew what a comfort to horses a light hand is, and how it keeps a good mouth and a good temper, they surely would not chuck and drag and pull at the rein as they often do. Our mouths are so tender that where we have not been spoiled or hardened with bad nor ignorant treatment, they feel the slightest movement of the driver's hand, and we know in an instant what is required of us. My mouth has never been spoiled, and I believe that was why the mistress preferred me to Ginger, although her paces were certainly quite as good. She used often to envy me, and said that it was all the fault of breaking in, and the gag-bit in London, that her mouth was not so perfect as mine. And then old Sir Oliver would say, "There, there, don't vex yourself. You have the greatest honour. A mare that can carry a tall man of our master's weight with all your spring and sprightly action does not need to hold her head down because she does not carry the lady. We horses must take things as they come, and always be contented and willing so long as we are kindly used." I had often wondered how it was that Sir Oliver had such a very short tail. It was really only 6 or 7 inches long, with a tassel of hair hanging from it. And on one of our holidays in the orchard I ventured to ask him by what accident it was that he had lost his tail. "Accident!" he snorted with a fierce look. "It was no accident. It was a cruel, shameful, cold-blooded act. When I was young I was taken to a place where these cruel things were done. I was tied up and made fast so that I could not stir, and then they came and cut off my long and beautiful tail, through the flesh and through the bone, and took it away." "How dreadful!" I exclaimed. "Dreadful, it was dreadful. But 'twas not only the pain, though that was terrible and lasted a long time. It was not only the indignity of having my best ornament taken from me, though that was bad, but it was this. How could I ever brush the flies off my sides and my hind legs any more? You who have tails just to whisk the flies off without thinking about it, you can't tell what a torment it is to have them settle upon you and sting, and have nothing in the world to lash them out with. I tell you it is a lifelong wrong and a lifelong loss. But, thank heaven, they don't do it now." "What did they do it for, then?" said Ginger. "For fashion," said the old horse with a stamp of his foot. "For fashion. If you know what that means, there was not a well-bred young horse in my time that did not have his tail docked in that shameful way, just as if the good God that made us did not know for what we wanted and what looked best." "I suppose it is fashion that makes them strap our heads up with those horrid bits that I was tortured with in London," said Ginger. "Of course it is," said he. "To my mind, fashion is one of the wickedest things in the world. Now look, for instance, at the way they serve dogs, cutting off their tails to make them look plucky, and shearing up their pretty little ears to a point to make them both look sharp, forsooth. I had a dear friend once, a brown terrier. Skye, they called her. She was so fond of me that she would never sleep out of my stall. She made her bed under the manger, and there she had a litter of 5 as pretty little puppies as need be. None were drowned, for they were a valuable kind, and how she pleased with them. When they got their eyes open and crawled about, it was a really pretty sight. But one day the man came and took them all away. I thought he might be afraid, as I should tread upon them, but it was not so. In the evening poor Skye brought them back, one by one in her mouth, not the happy little things that they were, but bleeding and crying pitifully. They had all had a piece of their tails cut off, and the soft flap of their pretty little ears was quite cut off. How their mother licked them, and how troubled she was, poor thing. I never forgot it. They healed in time, and they forgot the pain, but the nice soft flap, that was of course intended to protect the delicate part of their ears from dust and injury, was gone forever. Why don't they cut their own children's ears into points to make them look sharp? Why don't they cut the end of their noses to make them look plucky? One would be just as sensible as the other. What right have they to torment and disfigure God's creatures? Sir Oliver, though he was so gentle, was a fiery old fellow, and what he said was all so new to me and so dreadful that I found a bitter feeling toward men rise up in my mind that I never had before. Of course Ginger was very much excited. She flung up her head with flashing eyes and distended nostrils, declaring that men were both brutes and blockheads. "Who talks about blockheads?" said Merrylegs, who had just come up from the old apple tree where he had been rubbing himself against the low branch. "Who talks about blockheads? I believe that is a bad word." "Bad words were made for bad things," said Ginger, and she told him of what Sir Oliver had said. "It is all true," said Merrylegs sadly, "and I've seen that about the dogs over and over again where I lived first, but we won't talk about it here. You know that Master and John and James are always good to us, and talking against men in such a place as this doesn't seem fair or grateful, and I know there are good masters and good grooms besides ours, though of course ours are the best." This wise speech of good little Merrylegs, which we knew was quite true, cooled us all down, especially Sir Oliver, who was dearly fond of his master. And to turn the subject, I said, "Can anyone tell me the use of the blinkers?" "No," said Sir Oliver shortly, "because they have no use." "They are supposed," said Justice, the roan cob, in his calm way, "to prevent horses from shying and starting, and getting so frightened as to cause accidents." "Then what is the reason they do not put them on riding horses, especially on ladies' horses?" said I. "There is no reason at all," he said quietly, "except the fashion. They say that a horse would be so frightened to see the wheels of his own cart or carriage coming behind him that he would be sure to run away, although, of course, when he has ridden, he sees them all about him if the streets are crowded. I admit they do sometimes come too close to be pleasant, but we don't run away. We are used to it and understand it, and if we never had blinkers put on, we should never want them. We should see what was there and know what was what, and be much less frightened than by only seeing bits of things we can't understand. And of course there may be some nervous horses who have been hurt or frightened when they were young, who may be the better for them. But as I was never nervous, I can't judge." "I consider," said Sir Oliver, "that blinkers are dangerous things in the night. We horses can see much better in the dark than men can, and only an accident would never have happened if horses might have had the full use of their eyes. Some years ago I remember there was a hearse with 2 horses returning in one dark night, and just by Farmer Sparrow's house, where the pond is close to the road. The wheels went too near the edge, and the hearse was overturned in the water. Both the horses were drowned, and the driver hardly escaped. Of course, after this accident, a stout white rail was put up that it might easily be seen. But if those horses had not been partially blinded, they would of themselves have kept further from the edge, and no accident would have happened. When our master's carriage was overturned, before you came here, it was said that if the lamp on the left side had not gone out, John would have seen the great hole that the road makers had left, and so he might. But if old Colin had not had the blinkers on, he would have seen it, lamp or no lamp, for he was far too knowing an old horse to run into danger. As it was, he was very much hurt, The carriage was broken, and how John escaped nobody knew. I should say, said Ginger, curling her nostril, that these men, who are so wise, had better give orders that in the future all foals should be born with their eyes set just in the middle of their foreheads, instead of on the side. They always think they can improve upon nature and mend what God has made. Things were getting rather sore again, when Merrylegs held up his knowing little face and said, I'll tell you a secret. I believe John does not approve of blinkers. I heard him talking with the master about it one day. The master said that, if horses had been used to them, it might be dangerous in some cases to leave them off. And John said he thought it would be a good thing if all colts were broken in without blinders, as was the case in most foreign countries. So let us cheer up and have a run to the other end of the orchard. I believe the wind has blown down some apples, and we might as well just eat them up as the slugs. Merrylegs could not be resisted, so we broke off our long conversation and got up our spirits by munching some very sweet apples which lay scattered on the grass. The longer I lived at Birtwick, the more proud and happy I felt at having such a place. Our master and mistress were respected and beloved by all who knew them. They were good and kind to everybody and everything, not only men and women, but horses and donkeys, dogs and cats, cattle and birds. There was no oppressed or ill-used creature that had not a friend in them, and their servants took the same tone. If any of the village children were known to treat any creature cruelly, they soon heard about it from the hall. The squire and Farmer Grey had worked together, as they said, for more than 20 years to get check-reins on the cart horses done away with, and in our parts you seldom saw them. And sometimes, if mistress met a heavily laden horse with his head strained up, she would stop the carriage and get out, and reason with the driver in her sweet, serious voice, and try to show him how foolish and cruel it was. I don't think any man could withstand our mistress. I wish all ladies were like her. Our master, too, used to come down very heavy sometimes. I remember he was riding me toward home one morning when we saw a powerful man driving toward us in a light pony chaise with a beautiful little bay pony, with slender legs and a high-bred sensitive head and face. Just as he came to the park gates, the little thing turned toward them. The man, without word or warning, wrenched the creature's head round with such a force and suddenness that he nearly threw it on its haunches. Recovering itself, it was going on, when he began to lash at it furiously. The pony plunged forward, but the strong, heavy hand held the pretty creature back, with a force almost enough to break its jaw, while the whip still cut into him. It was a dreadful sight to me, for I knew what fearful pain it gave that delicate little mouth. The master gave me the word, and we were up with him in a second. "Sawyer," he cried in a stern voice, "is that pony made of flesh and blood?" "Flesh and blood and temper," he said. "He's too fond of his own will, and that don't suit me." He spoke as if he was in a strong passion. He was a builder who had been to the park on business. "And do you think," said the master sternly, "that treatment like this will make him fond of your will?" "He had no business to make that turn. His road was straight on," said the men roughly. "You have often driven that pony to my place," said the master. "It only shows the creature's memory and intelligence. How did he know that you were not going there again? But that has little to do with it. I must say, Mr. Sawyer, that a more unmanly, brutal treatment of a little pony it was never my painful lot to witness. By giving way to such passion you injure your own character as much, nay, more than you injure your horse. And remember, we shall all have to be judged according to our works, whether they be toward man or toward beast." Master rode me home slowly, and I could tell by his voice how the thing had grieved him. He was just as free to speak to gentlemen of his own rank as to those below him. For another day, when we were out, he met Captain Langley, a friend of our master's. He was driving a splendid pair of greys in a kind of brake. After a little conversation, the captain said, "What do you think of my new team, Mr. Douglas? You know, you are the judge of horses in these parts, and I should like your opinion." The master backed me up a little so as to get a good view of them. "Well, they are an uncommonly handsome pair," he said, "and if they are as good as they look, I am sure you need not wish for anything better. I see you still hold that pet scheme of yours for worrying your horses and lessening their power." "What do you mean?" said the other. "The check reins? Oh, I know that's a hobby of yours. Well, the fact is, I'd like to see my horses hold their heads up." "So do I," said the master, "as well as any man. But I don't like to see them held up. That takes all the shine out of it. Now, you are a military man, Langley, and no doubt like to see your regiment look well on parade, heads up and all that. But would you not take much credit for your drill if all your men had their heads tied to a backboard? It might not be much harm on parade except to worry and fatigue them. But how would it be in a bayonet charge against the enemy, when they want the free use of every muscle and all their strength thrown forward? I would not give them much chance for their victory. And it is just the same with horses. You fret and worry their tempers and increase their power. You will not let them throw their weight against their work, and so they have to do so much more with their joints and muscles, and of course it wears them up faster. You may depend upon it. Horses were intended to have their heads free as men's are. And if we could act a little more according to common sense and a good deal less according to fashion, we should find many things work easier. Besides, you know as well as I do that if a horse makes a false step, he has much less chance of recovering himself if his head and neck are fastened back. And now," said the master, laughing, "I have given my hobby a good trot out, and can't you make up your mind to mount him too, Captain? Your example would go a long way." "I believe you are right in theory," said the other, "and that's a rather hard hit about the soldiers, but, well, I'll think about it." And so they parted. I do hope you enjoyed this latest reading of selections from Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. Now, I do find these readings to be interesting as well, especially the chat in the orchard, where the horses are discussing, animal modification and so forth, and the idea of fashion causing harm to horses, all for some human urge for beauty of some sort, and the mistreatment of animals. And what I find particularly interesting is the last section we read, where the master, Black Beauty's master, is yelling at Sawyer, the construction driver, for brutally assaulting his little pony for, the horse didn't do anything. I have ridden horses quite a bit, actually, and they do have memories. They remember routes. They remember if you do something the same time over and over. And like us, let's say you go on autopilot driving home from work and you tune out for a moment and suddenly find yourself on the highway driving, someplace else because that's typically the route you take, but you were trying to go someplace else. Same thing for horses as well. And so to the animal, the pony, as far as the pony knew, was doing the correct thing, was going where they usually went. But to be so brutally assaulted by his master must have been quite a confusing shock. And I find what the master says to be quite true, such an unmanly, brutal thing, and, the treatment of the animal, the treatment of the pony, speaks more to Mr. Sawyer's character than any action or anything else that he had done before that. And I think that is very true. You can tell a lot about a person, about how they treat animals. In this case, Mr. Sawyer, you can almost analyze him in this case of maybe he has some sort of insecurity, power trip, ego, to be able to, this thing didn't do what I wanted it to do, so I'm going to punish it. Maybe that gave him a sense of power. So I sort of see Mr. Sawyer as this insecure, unmanly, gross human being now after that small interaction. So I think what I like about this book as well is that it does address the concept of animal cruelty. What is interesting too, though, is there are actual modifications that farmers do for either working animals or farm animals that has been found over the years that actually does assist the animals. It helps keep them a little bit more healthy, such things like that. But I do think that there is a time and place for, things like that versus, doing things purely for looks. If there is a reason for, docking of a tail or, crimping an ear or so forth, there are actual uses for that for working or farm animals. But what they are talking about here, what the horses were discussing, was, mutilation for the sake of fashion. And that, I think we can see how they feel about that, really. So very interesting selection here. I'm very much looking forward to discussing these sections, these chapters that we read a little bit more in the Vesta Box episode. But I do hope you are enjoying the book so far. I highly encourage you to go and read it yourself. It is not what you think. A lot of people, I was discussing this actually with someone the other day, and they said, "Oh, Black Beauty, that's just a horse book." And I said, well, no, it is not just a horse book. As you can see, as we've been reading this, it addresses many, many things. And again, I cannot wait to discuss them more in full with you. I don't know if you can hear a difference in the quality of sound. I'm still figuring out noise cancelling for my recording space. Unfortunately, I'm very limited on where I can really sit down to record effectively, but we have our new microphone, and I'm actually very excited. It is such a neat little microphone. I actually got the Razer Siren V2 Pro. That is the microphone that I have now. Very sturdy, looks very well made, and the sound quality is very nice. I just need to figure out how to do the noise cancelling and such to really help the microphone do its job better, so you don't hear annoying background noises and such. I still have some of those issues with the editing, but I'm still conducting some research to see how to better mitigate that. And one last note, I suddenly decided that Sir Oliver was an Irish horse, so let me know if you like that. I'm trying to work on my, I guess, voice acting, if you will, to try to provide these different sorts of accents. I listened to some Irish dialects before. Obviously, I'm not Irish, but I wanted to try to lend that other aspect to this character to make it a little more fun. So please don't hold that against me. I'm still learning how to listen to things and bring the essence of what I hear into my work. So with that being said, look forward to seeing you in the next video. The next sections we are going to be reading are particularly interesting. So, with that, magna est veritas et praevalebit, everyone. Have a wonderful day.